Now, yesterday for Star Wars Day, along with getting Tales of the Empire on Disney Plus, and my review for the Barris episodes should be up tomorrow, we also got a new trailer for The Acolyte, which thus far has not exactly been warmly welcomed by everyone, just like that first Acolyte trailer from about a month and a half ago was not warmly welcomed either. As of right now, it has nearly 700,000 dislikes to just less than 200,000 likes. And as I have discussed before, a lot of the negative reaction to the series and to these trailers is in large part because of Leslie Headland, the showrunner, and her association with Harvey Weinstein. She was his personal assistant for roughly a year, and he, as most of you out there know, he has done some very bad things, and people feel she must have been aware of them and did and said nothing about it. However, I'm not here to talk about all of that, or for better or worse, to let that impact what I think or how I feel about this trailer. You certainly can if you want, that is your prerogative. But I am simply going to talk about it for what it is and in the context of other things we know or that have been said about this show, and in some cases said by Leslie Headland herself, including how she said that this show will not be kind to the Jedi, which becomes very clear the more I see from or about this show or from these trailers. And so, to get right to it, and I will mainly be talking about some of the lines spoken in this trailer, not so much going through it and breaking down scene by scene or shot by shot or finding every little Easter egg we saw in the background. Plenty of other channels do those sorts of things, so I will leave it to them. That said, we actually have to start with something I found rather curious about the very beginning of the trailer, that being when it said it was from the studio that brought you The Mandalorian, Andor, and Ahsoka. And I mean, first of all, well, yeah, no kidding. It was brought to you from the same studio. All Star Wars comes from the same place. It is all coming from a Lucasfilm under Disney. I don't really know or get why they would say that or put that. I also find it funny that the two shows it chose not to mention were the Book of Boba Fett and the Kenobi series. I guess we now know how Lucasfilm internally feels about those two shows and why, despite Ewan McGregor being all for a second season of Kenobi, we are not hearing anything about it, and it seems like that is never going to happen. But anyway, setting that little oddity aside, also at the start of the trailer, we hear a voice say, and that voice belongs to a character named Tassie Loa, that we have not heard of or know anything about from elsewhere. Anyway, she says, "Last night a Jedi was murdered," which is, as far as we have heard, kind of what the whole premise of the show is about. Someone is going around murdering Jedi, and they're trying to figure out who and why. Though I think we could pretty safely assume this person is either a Sith themselves or somehow associated with the Sith, that they are an acolyte of the Sith, essentially. Go figure with the name of the show. Now, I have no idea why the Sith would be so brazen or allow one of their acolytes to be, why they would be murdering Jedi and potentially outing themselves at this point in time, nor do I know why or how the Jedi would forget about this encounter with the Sith 100 years later when they seem to be shocked by their return in The Phantom Menace. And I know and have heard many of the possible reasons for that. Everything from all the Jedi that encounter this Sith will be killed, which, when you consider, it seems like at one point in this trailer and other trailers, a half dozen or so Jedi encounter something that I guess looks like a Sith. I don't think it looks that bad. It looks a little awkward. I get Joker vibes, for better or worse, out of the way they look. But anyway, that would be a lot of Jedi for them to kill all at once, or to go missing if he disposes of the bodies or something, and for nothing to come of it. I think the Jedi would find it all very, very mysterious that a bunch of Jedi had been killed or gone missing, especially considering those Jedi, the ones that would be killed or disappeared, seem to be investigating some very mysterious murders of Jedi. Others will then say or argue that, well, maybe it is not an actual Sith, it's just a very powerful dark side user that is something different from a Sith. But I would argue that a very powerful dark side user is essentially the same thing as a Sith, or would be seen as the same thing as a Sith by the Jedi, even if they do not call themselves as such. A Sith is kind of the end result of fully embracing or falling to the dark side. Not unlike how Ahsoka doesn't call herself a Jedi, but acts and behaves and has the skills of a Jedi and is one in all but name, and would be seen or called a Jedi by many. It's also not unlike how Qui-Gon assumed Maul was a Sith because of how strong he was with the dark side and the skill set he had. It's not like if Maul had said to him, "I am not a Sith, I am this," Qui-Gon would have breathed a sigh of relief and been like, "Thank the Force, the Sith aren't back. For a minute there I was worried, but it turns out we're all good." Or imagine if when Mace Windu had said to Palpatine that the oppression of the Sith will never return, Palpatine had simply said, "I'm not a Sith," and Windu was like, "Oh, we're all good then. Sorry about the hassle, Chancellor. You can go about your day." And funny enough, this Darkseid user was even asked in the trailer, "What are you?" And so it'd be the same thing as this Darksider responding with, "I'm not a Sith, I am this or that." The Jedi would not care if they didn't call themselves a Sith. They would be taken as the same type of threat. It would still be thought of as a Sith-like Darksider returning, and it wouldn't explain why, again 100 years later, why the Jedi would say the Sith had been extinct for a millennium, or at the very least wouldn't bring up these other powerful Darkseid users they had encountered 100 years ago. Heck, Qui-Gon would probably then think Maul was one of them and not a Sith, or he would call them one of whatever they had called themselves or whatever they assumed they were. He would not jump to the conclusion they were a Sith if there were other things like the Sith or that had called themselves other things that they had encountered relatively recently. I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous to think the Sith were able to hide from the Jedi kind of because they didn't call themselves Sith. Again, the name is almost kind of irrelevant here, and when Ki-Adi-Mundi says the Sith have been extinct for a millennium, I would argue what he is really saying here is we haven't seen anything like them in all that time. Certainly not a Darkseid user that can take on multiple Jedi at once like this one apparently will. But anyway, skipping ahead to a bit later in the trailer and to something that is truly going to make the Jedi out to be fools, it seems, we hear Jedi Master Vernestra say, "I sense this is only a small part of a larger plan, some sort of shift to tip the scales." So you're telling me 100 years ago, at least one Jedi, and probably more, thought the dark side might be rising again, and they just let it go or forgot later on? That's what they're seemingly going to go with for this series? And I say seemingly because sure, this could be, I don't know, it could be taken out of context or something, and she could be talking about something other than a shift in the balance of the Force. But it really sounds like what the show is going to be about, or what it'll show or imply, is that the Jedi are being murdered. They encounter some sort of very powerful dark side user. Some of them even start wondering if this is the dark side rising. And then 100 years later, the Jedi Council seems utterly baffled and very skeptical about the return of the dark side. I mean, I know Headland said they weren't going to be kind to the Jedi, but this is very unkind to imply they were this kind of stupid. That there were hints and clues of the Sith's return 100 years before the prequels, and they're all just ignored or forgotten about by pretty much everyone, apparently. Even though, yes, there are members of the Jedi Council then, during the prequels, that would have been around during the time of the Acolyte, including the great and all-powerful Yoda, or maybe not so great and powerful Yoda, because though I thought he missed a lot of clear signs during the Clone Wars about Palpatine and other things, it turns out he was missing stuff way, way before that, or just not able to put pretty much anything together. But moving on, or moving back to the beginning of the trailer, we hear another character say, the Jedi justify their galactic dominance in the name of peace, but that peace is a lie. And I know some right away are going to get all excited that he partly quoted the Sith code, the whole peace is a lie thing. But I really want to know about this galactic dominance thing he's talking about. Like, what are the Jedi doing that they're dominating the galaxy? And don't get me wrong, I do think part of the downfall of the Jedi is certainly that they get caught up in the politics and workings of the Republic too closely, or they work with the Republic too closely and kind of become an enforcement arm of the Republic in a way, certainly during the Clone Wars when they are generals of the Grand Army of the Republic. And as I have said before, they are supposed to be following the will of the Force, not the will of the Republic. Yes, they can work with the Republic, but they are certainly working too closely with them. It also should be noted that we know this character is a criminal and one who probably got caught by a Jedi, and so he's just mad at them for being imprisoned. A lot of criminals tend to be mad at those who captured them and make up excuses for their actions, and so this could be basically what he's doing here. And so I don't think this is a terrible line coming from him or from his perspective. And we do have to keep in mind characters, like I was just kind of saying, they can be wrong or they can try manipulating others with the things they say. A random criminal saying the Jedi were oppressive does not mean it is canon and that the Jedi are oppressive. Just because Anakin once said, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil, doesn't mean the Jedi are evil. However, I just don't think the galaxy on the whole would see the Jedi this way as dominating it, essentially. And they certainly don't dominate it as far as we know, or would even truly be able to, keeping in mind there's only at most around 10,000 Jedi, and there are millions of systems in the Star Wars galaxy, so it's not like they're out there in full force and in everyone's face all the time. Most people in the galaxy, the vast, vast, vast majority, will never ever encounter a Jedi, much less be arrested by one. This guy, I'm guessing, was just very lucky or unlucky, depending on your point of view. Furthermore, the prequels seem to imply that the Jedi are very much at the disposal of the Republic, not kind of the other way around. So it's not like, or so I would imagine, the people in the galaxy would think that the Jedi are affecting policies or hold sway over the Senate or something. I mean, maybe people do, or maybe they're upset that, like I kind of said, they are sort of an enforcement arm in a way, especially during the Clone Wars. But I don't think, again, in the prequels or that era, it is presented that way exactly, that people would see the Jedi as this oppressive force. Though granted, this is 100 years before the prequels, and in the High Republic era, which this is at the tail end of, or set at the tail end of, the Jedi were a bit more proactive, shall we say. They were more front and center, and they were out there trying to help in expansion into the Outer Rim. They even create this beacon that is supposed to be a symbol of their presence in the galaxy, essentially. So maybe some see that as being dominating. I don't know. Certainly criminals would see it that way. So again, I don't really have a problem with this line. It is what it is. All right, and moving on, we have one last line to take a look at, or to listen to, perhaps I should say, or listen to me say. This one from Mother Anissa. She is the mother of the clan of witches, essentially a clan that it seems like May, our main character, comes from. The trailer seems to imply she is saying these words to her when she was younger, presumably when she is about to leave with the Jedi. Anyway, she says, "Destiny is not decided for you by an anonymous force. If you want to pull the thread and change everything, then pull it." And she is half right here, because actually your destiny is decided by the Force. George Lucas himself has said everyone has a destiny, but you can choose to follow it or not.
We have a destiny if we want to follow it. We live for a reason and must discover what it is.
And so, again, keeping in mind characters can be wrong or be motivated to twist the truth, I don't have much of a problem with this line either coming from this particular character. She seems to be trying to lay some sort of seed of doubt about the Jedi into May's head before she goes off with them. One that apparently will come to fruition later on, since May doesn't seem to stay with the Jedi and even becomes an acolyte of the Sith, apparently. And certainly what the Sith do is not follow the destiny laid out by the Force. If anybody tugs on the threads, it is the Sith. They like to change things. That is why they imbalance things, because they are so selfish. They don't care about anybody but themselves. Either way, I could certainly see why some wouldn't know or wouldn't want to believe that the Force has a destiny for you, or that someone would want to defy that destiny and make their own way. Heck, even Leia says to Luke that you must follow your own path and no one can choose it for you. And I'd imagine most people in the Star Wars galaxy, as well as here in the real world, they like to think they have their own destiny in their hands, that we have free will, that we can make what we will of this life, not that everything is predetermined, and if it is, that we can still defy it. And so, to start to wrap this up, I think the trailer, visually as is, and not worrying about anything and everything else around it, or within it, what is said about it, or said by the characters in it, I think it does look pretty good, especially for Disney+. There is a lot of on-location filming, and I think it shows. I think this looks better than some of the other shows have looked, for sure. And I think most people, most casual fans, or normies, or whatever you'd like to call them, they're also going to think this looks good because it has lightsabers and edgy lines, and for the most part out there, that's all that matters to them, or that's really all they care about when it comes to Star Wars. They don't care if it all aligns with the prequels perfectly, if it breaks the canon or not. Heck, a lot of people watching this trailer probably don't even have a clue when this show takes place, and might never figure it out while watching it. Again, they just see Jedi, they see Sith and lightsabers and think, this is going to be cool, and that's what Star Wars more or less is to them. And so, as I keep saying, I am not going to make any final judgments till I actually see the show. Yes, there are things I have seen or heard that make me extremely leery, but I will still give it a fair chance when it comes out, and I will let you know what I think, good or bad. Well, that is going to be all I have for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of this latest Acolyte trailer. Are you excited for this series? Are you maybe a bit anxious or nervous or cautiously optimistic even? Or maybe you just don't care or you're never going to watch it because it looks terrible. Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let us talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.